to belabor this any longer than we must. Tonight, we have a 6:30 end time, a hard fast, because the superintendent has someplace that she needs to be. So she need to be done by 6:30. And anything that needs more discussion will be done next week. So we'll call to order. Introduction of board members, starting over here.
Jeff Hanley.
Joanne O'Brien.
Molly Rogers.
Dan Coots.
Becky Fless. All right, administrative staff.
Katie Gould, Superintendent.
Andrea Dish, Business Manager.
Angela Hardy, Director of Curriculum. Shree Cool, Principal of HT.
Jeff Ellis, Transportation Director.
Terry McGuire, Director of Technology.
Sarah Sims, Principal at Gardner Regional Middle School.
Bethany Roy, Principal at Instant Randolph Consolidated School.
Mike Fryer, High School Assistant Principal.
Jackie Bray, Assistant Principal of High School. Lauren Arnold, Building Principal of High School.
Nate Stover, Athletic Director.
Vicki Duguay, Building Principal at Riverview Community School.
Sarah Bolduc, Director of Special Services. Chris Levine, Principal at Laurie Richards School.
So thank you all so much and thank you for being here. So we'll begin our discussion tonight with the MSAD11 26-27 budget.
And let me take it over.
Hooray.
Sorry, my computer just decided to restart. So lovely. Hang on. Well, it's restarting. I will go over the documents that I've shared with board members. As a reminder, I have shared them with you in Google Docs. I've also shared them with administrators. Board members, you need to remember when you log in Google, you need to use your MSAD11 password, username and password in order to access the Google Docs. So where are we from last time? Actually, we have lost progress from last time. And we will go over why that is. In front of you, you have the expenditure articles dated today. Currently, the budget is up $1,675,802.47. It's an increase of 5.10%. And I'm going to see if I can log in. It's gonna say blue for me, but I don't know if you can. So in the documentation that I've also included, I have given an expenditure by an expenditure article increase of where we are now for each of the 11 expenditure articles. And it's basically the same as I shared with you in the meeting. I keep updating the totals so you can see where the overages are now. And for Jeff, I have added contractual and statutory, those things that we are required. So anything that has to do with our collective bargaining agreements, that would be contractual. Anything that I'm required or that we're required by law would be statutory. At the bottom, I have added additional language. I've given you a shorter version of our overall summary increase. So what you see is a truncated view. So I just want to share that of the $1.6 million increase, that $836,459.11 is salaries and benefits. That's 49.91% of the total. Special purpose private school tuition, an increase of $56,892.05, an increase of 3.39%. Main care seed, which is part of the hugest part of the increase that we see tonight. It's an increase of $380,000. It's 22.68%. Special purpose private school transportation, an increase of $169,258, 10.10%. The annual bus lease, it was a large number, so I grabbed it. The increase is $31,750, an increase of 1.89%. Instructional software, $108,646.21, an increase of 6.48%. And technology supplies, an increase of $94,537.48. And those are just shifts from last year. So while the budget may be flat, certain areas may go up or down, and software and supplies are two of them. I know that you're thinking that how can the increase be more than 100%? It's more than 100% because I didn't grab any of the decreases in this document. I just grabbed the large numbers, so it was meant to be just an overall. On the next document that I handed out, I gave you an updated view of our cuts to date by expenditure article. I'm going to go through those. So Article 1, we talked about the two elementary teacher professionals, a cut of $141,161. We have also cut half-time instructional support person at Helen Thompson School for a cut of $51,965.73. So when you see something in brackets, it's not actually a cut, it's an add back in. And this was just a transfer from another expenditure article, but there's actually an increase of miscellaneous regular instruction supplies in the amount of $19,768.79. We have also cut an unfilled learning lab ed tech position in the amount of $49,871.82. Total cuts for regular instruction. Article 1 is $223,230.36. Special education. Special education, we have added $674,781.91. 559,000 of the addition, $559,778 is special purpose private school placements for this year. We talked about the main care seat on the previous page. That's an increase of $333,950. Sarah and I will go over that with you. Again, that's an increase. The two unfilled special ed positions, one in the amount of $87,425.01, another unfilled special ed position in the amount of $91,869.93, and miscellaneous special ed supplies, a cut in the amount of $39,651.39. It's an addition of $674,781.91. Article 3 is CTE instruction, as it was mentioned earlier during our meetings, that there is no tuition or no contribution to CTE, the Capital Area Technical School, for this year. However, we have been told that there will be one for next year, so there's no change in Article 3. Article 4 is other instruction. It's where other instruction outside of the school day, things like credit recovery, as well as athletics and co-curricular live. There is a reduction in the amount of $2,683.80. Basically, they included additional credit recovery software, and as a result, it was meant to be a zero, a flat increase. So I removed salaries to offset, in which the difference is basically the benefits. So that is what you see there. Article, whoops.
I'm sorry, is that what S&B stands for?
Salary and benefits.
Okay.
Mhm. Article 5, student and staff support rather. You remember a lot of things live there, including all of the other positions that support students. So guidance, library, instructional technology, curriculum, pretty much everything that isn't either special ed or regular instruction or athletics lives in student and staff support. We have an unfilled instructional coach position that we have decided to cut in the amount of $110,990. Also an instructional coach, stipend in the amount of $12,500. $5.78, and miscellaneous supplies in the amount of $26,203.91 for a total cut of $149,199.87.
And Andrea, that instructional coach unfilled position is currently filled. We have a retirement, and so we will not fill it for next school year, just to clarify.
Thank you.
The OC.
Opportunity culture. So the stipend that went along with that specific position is the only one that was cut. System administrations, there's a benefit cut of $59.27. I don't know if staff saw, but our dental insurance actually came in. I think I was able to cut a 0.5%. So that's what it equaled in system administration. I know that's a big deal, but I needed it in order for things to work out in the spreadsheet. School administration, which is the office of the principal. It includes the building administrator, assistants, as well as administrative assistants. There's actually a reduction of $187,429.81. That consists of a half-time assistant principal at Helen Thompson School. That is a cut of $50,150.70. An opportunity culture leadership stipend in the amount of $5,000 that was given to an administrator that has been removed. An assistant principal at Gardner Area High School that has been put in the budget for reduction, and miscellaneous supplies in the amount of $7,482.47. Total cuts in the amount of $187,429.81. Transportation. There have been cuts in the amount of $63,428.78, which includes benefits, again, the dental deduction, in the amount of $161.68. And this afternoon, or actually this morning, Sarah and I reduced special purpose private school transportation in the amount of $63,267.10. Facilities maintenance, again, benefits in the amount of $209.33. Again, the dental insurance coming in. So it's a total addition to the cuts in the amount of $48,540.69. I know that sounds weird, but we actually added as opposed to decreased from our last meeting. Any questions about that particular document? Thanks. So, where did,
Sorry, can I just
sure.
jump in, and maybe I missed this part, but just like the special purpose private school placements, those sort of showed up in the last week.
Yep. Along with the main care seed money.
Okay.
So, how did things go bad?
Is that unusual?
Things going bad?
No. I see that things go bad all the time. No, that seed money and the placement.
I'm going to go over the seed, so I will show you how, Sarah and I will we will play off each other. I'm going to explain what happened and how it happened.
Mhm.
So the morning after our last budget meeting, I was looking at our main care seed expenditures that I needed to journal. As a reminder, main care seed expenditures are the district's portion of main care expenses for our out-of-district special purpose private school placements. I downloaded the file and honestly, I couldn't believe what I saw. So what you see in front of you is a document that's called 25-26 main care seed expenditures. And I just included our expenditures for this year. So what you see is in this current year, what we always have what the state always recovers is the last 2 quarters of last fiscal year. So you see 3 quarter 2025, 4 quarter 2025, 3rd and 4th quarter of the last fiscal year. And then you see the 1st quarter of this year. And then you see the 2nd quarter of this year. And what you can start to see is things rising.
Yeah.
So if you look at first quarter, there were $44,000 in main care seat expenditures. And I broke it out by placement so you can see how much is actually paid over individual placements. So the first quarter that I journaled this year was $44,854.60. Then little while later, we got the fourth quarter. As you can see, it rose by $20-something thousand or $20,000. So it was $62,168.28. It was bad. And I was thinking perhaps it was going to get better with the first quarter. No, it didn't get better, it didn't get worse, but it didn't get any better either. So the first quarter 2026, those expenditures were $64,576.20. When I looked at my main care seat expenditure for the last quarter of this year, it increased to $102,979.10, which is considerable. So to date, for this recovery year, we have paid $274,578.18, which means the state has recouped from our subsidy that amount, directly reduced our subsidy for the current year in that amount, and we offset it by budgeting main care seat expenditure. So below in the next bracket, you will see how those expenditures break down. This is what they actually billed the feds. So by quarter, so you can see to date, they have billed main care seed $730,000, $559.31. Our portion is the $274,578.18, or 37.58%. I was actually dumbfounded. Knowing the number of placements additional placements that we have for next year, and knowing that we have no way of controlling what these special purpose private schools bill to main care, and that it is our responsibility, I felt compelled to adjust our main care seat. Sarah?
Yeah.
Sarah, do you wanna help? Do you wanna talk about what those expenditures look like, specifically the behavioral expenditures, which are 706,000 of the 730 that they're actually billing main care for?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So for the students that we have placed out of district that we're receiving or we're reviewing the billing for that, we're paying portions of those behavioral components. Those pieces are typically related to intensive life skills programming or intensive behavioral programming. One of the two. Sometimes individually, sometimes 2-on-1 when you do have a student that receives 2-on-1 service in a special purpose placement related to their IEP goals. And we have students with a range of goals. Some with goals that include basic adult daily living or activities of daily living, such as brushing your teeth or combing your hair, those sorts of things, or learning how to shop to be able to buy food and prepare food. So similar to our high school programming or middle school life skills programming, but on a much more intensive level. Our middle school and high school often does those things in a small group setting. So a much more intensive level. Same for behavioral. Students are receiving significant instruction on how to regulate themselves, support with co-regulation, follow through, and some wraparound services. So maybe speech and behavioral services or coach reading.
Can you also talk about the districts now being responsible for students age 22?
We currently don't have anyone on this list that is that old. We do have students in high school. Several years ago, special education expanded to age 22 or the 22nd birthday. And so services would stop the day before the 22nd birthday. There are students that we currently have in high school that we're anticipating needing to provide services to up until that time.
So as a reminder, these expenditures are in addition to the amount that we pay in addition to special purpose private school tuition. Will you also talk about what would happen if a student was not eligible for main care but needed the services?
We've had that happen before. We've had a student in the last several years that's not eligible for main care services. So in that situation, the special purpose, we still pay the special purpose private school tuition. And then they're billing us for additional services. For that student, if I'm recalling correctly, Andrea, correct me if I'm wrong, we had to pay for their behavioral health professional. So we paid, in addition to the tuition, we paid the salary for that individual. I think salary and benefits, just like we do on the EFSO 4. Do you want me to keep talking?
I do.
Okay. So the truly unfortunate thing here is this represents the students we have right now. And we're projecting to put 5 more, I think, after cuts this morning out of district. To 5 or 6.
I think we have, I think there is 7 additional.
7.
So I've included that in their documentation.
Okay, that's the next page, right? Yeah, so we're anticipating placing 7 more students out of district next year. So when you're talking about 10 students here, and we're seeing growth that looks like the back of this page, and then they're talking about almost doubling our out of district placement, it's truly a tremendous number. It's a very, very large number when we're projecting out seed for almost double the students that we have right now.
Sarah, can you remind everyone what the process is for the team coming together to determine appropriate placement and the responsibility that we have in that process?
Absolutely. So for any students that are currently placed out of district, we have worked through an internal process providing anything and everything we can think of in-house before we place students out of district. Chrissy or I, as special ed director, are in attendance in those meetings. And we will ask, we have a whole, if there's anything we can think of that we should do or could do before we place a student, we ask that question and we implement those actions. Once we work through all of the in-house pieces, it's typically a fairly lengthy process if we have those concerns because the IEP team's coming together, they're trying new accommodations, new modifications, additional services. For instance, if we have a student with behavioral needs at the elementary level, maybe we've moved them over to STARS. Typically STARS is our behavior program, typically it's a half-day program. Students still having intensive needs, maybe we keep them there for the full day instead of a half day. Still having intensive needs, maybe we move to an abbreviated day to see if they can sustain a shorter day. Maybe we put in a functional behavior assessment, which is a lengthy assessment process that assesses the function of behavior with a BCBA. And we do all of those things typically before we would consider an out-of-district placement. So that's the behavioral lens. For the life skills lens, it would be for a student that's needs, usually we have a life skills needs, and then they might have other needs that would exceed what we can provide for in district. So for instance, if we have a student that's has life skills needs, coupled with some behavioral needs, maybe coupled with some other impairments, those are the sorts of students that we might not be able to meet their programming needs in district for them to receive benefit from their education. So that's the lens that we would look through placement. Place a student out of district. Usually it's at least a year-long process here. Where we're working through all of the things we could potentially do in-house before we consider out-of-district placement. For students placed out of district, either Chrissy or I attend all of those meetings as well. And when we place a student, there's criteria for return. Usually it's something about safety. Usually that is the student can maintain safety across the school day or maintain safety across the school day most school days. That's usually the criteria that's on those applications. And at every one of those out-of-district IEP meetings, if we're not reviewing anything safety related, the question is, are they ready to come back? And then we'll start the transition back. This district is fortunate that many of our out-of-district placements are close by, and we've had some success transitioning students back from out of district. We have 2 that we'll potentially be looking to transition back next year, but I anticipate a very long process. While we're transitioning students back, we still pay the full tuition rate for the placement. They'll send support with the student as we're transitioning them back. until they become our student again all day, every day. We're still engaging with them.
So before we had our meeting today, Sarah and I met this morning and went over every single one of her anticipated placements for next year. And while it doesn't look like we removed very many, we actually removed maybe a half a dozen, Sarah?
We did, we removed both of my open positions. This district has always historically held two placements as open. So if someone moves in, we had a student move in a couple weeks ago that needs an out-of-district placement. So historically, we've always held two in the budget. We removed both of those. We removed two additional placements for students that aren't going to be likely to be placed in the next year for reasons I can't say here. And we removed two other placements, one for a student that left us, just like we have students come in, we have students leave. And one that we think will be able to meet the needs in-house with some intensive support that's in kindergarten. So we haven't done all the pieces for that student yet.
In addition to removing the placements, we also removed transportation for those students.
And see, we removed all three pieces for those students. It gives us a very tight out-of-district budget for next year, as much as it doesn't look tight because those numbers are very large. It's very tight. There's no additional room for any additional placements.
And I think we talked last week about you, Chrissy, some building administrators conducting observations. Can you just speak to that briefly?
Actually, Chris and I are doing observations. We did 3 last week. We're combining observations for our 4-year-olds, our incoming 4-year-olds and our incoming kindergartners. CDS will of course be funding the 4-year-olds, but we're funding the kindergartners. They're both coming here next year. So we're combining observations for that. Last week, we observed 3 students at the Children's Center in Augusta. Tomorrow, Chris and I are observing 8 students at Heartleaf, ABA in Augusta. We have another observation scheduled late April at a local district that's providing services already. We have 1 more observation to be scheduled. Our hope is that through those observations, we can truly identify the students that we can service in-house, or at least have a better idea heading into IEP meetings versus just pieces of paper. Before last year, historically, we just got into IEP meetings with pieces of evaluations, minutes from meetings. Last year, we started to observe the students so that we could get a sense of who they were and their needs.
Yes, go ahead.
If someone's not qualified for main care, does that mean that they may have insurance that might cover some of these things?
It means we pick up the bill entirely. Any of those those add-ons, I don't know how better to explain it. Those add-ons would be billed at 100% to the district as opposed to the split that we now have with the feds. So we pick up 37% and then feds pick up the rest. It would all be ours.
And the expense is completely out of our control. And we're obligated to provide this service to the student in our district.
Yes.
So when we've eliminated these placements and we say there's no room, when they come, we simply have to pay.
We have to find money in the budget to pay.
Okay.
Can we ask families, like, if they're eligible for like Katie Beckett main care, or then somebody would help them do that, or?
I will say the out-of-district placements are excellent about working with families through options to engage with a range of main care options. So either standard main care or Katie Beckett. They are really phenomenal about working with us and the family to get that paperwork completed. The student we had that we were paying for the EHP, it took a while, but eventually they worked through the process and they're covered now.
Get there, yeah. And this is true for every district in Maine, public school district.
I could ask Andrew, I thought you had reached out to your business managers to see if they were seeing similar increases.
Yes, they are seeing similar increases. And there's also additional conversation in the newspapers about main care billing. Do I go there? So in the newspapers recently, in the local papers, as well as either the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, there was an article about the increase in main care costs being billed for autistic students. I would recommend anyone who's curious to read those articles. It's enlightening, if nothing else. But there are concerns about the current administration has raised concerns with the state of Maine about some of its billing practices for main care. And we have since received a letter from, what is her position, Sarah? That basically they have been following the rules and they are waiting. Do you want to talk more about her letter?
I don't remember the particulars.
I don't either, but she feels confident that they've done all the right things. So we shall see, but this is in the news right now. So if you reach out, you will see articles about main care billing for special ed students and
According to this timeline, if you went backwards, is trending up, would it be trending down if you went back to the second and first quarter of 25? I mean, is there any explanation for why behavior is the driver? You have more children that have behavior problems that are putting a burden on this?
As far as the main care seed expenditures, I mean, Andrea and I went through these students one by one today, and there's some dramatic differences, and there haven't been significant changes in their programming.
I mean, because everything is driven by behavior problems from the way you're showing us here, yeah. Anyone looking for the root cause of why we're having behavior problems with so many children? Okay, home life bad, or I mean, what's going on?
Globally, no.
I mean,
That's a bigger
locally.
problem than just this, or a bigger challenge than just this district. As far as seed goes, I mean, Andrea and I spent a great deal of time looking at seed student by student earlier. And there haven't been, when I look at, say, a student that's Q3 is much lower than their quarter now, there haven't been significant changes in their programming.
I'm looking at what I see and driving costs. One thing, behavioral, is driving costs.
the concern I have if we're looking to send an additional 7 students out, that we have no choice but to budget additional seed money to cover those expenses. It will come right off our subsidy. It's not like Sarah reviews all of the expenses to make sure that the students are appropriate and they're here at the time that the services were rendered. It's a spreadsheet that is pages and pages and pages long every quarter. I would not want to be the one to review it.
But it's not because we're classifying children differently. Okay,
I don't have an answer.
well, something-
What I'm hearing you say is they received the same service in the first quarter as they did the second quarter, but the expense changed.
They're very similar,
Similar, okay.
very similar.
And hence the questions about the reimbursement. Why is it going up so much if services are essentially the same?
So we talked about years ago, the district went through years and years ago. Trying to think if there's anybody in this room. We used to bill for main care. Yep. Yeah, Becky was here. And they came and did a program review, and I remember I've talked to the board about it several times about it. The reason that we no longer bill for main care is because we were cited. Basically, main care reimbursement is a medical reimbursement model that schools have been encouraged to seek reimbursement for educational services. So there's some overlap. There's obviously speech and language, OTPT, and now there's behavioral. Main care was not meant for educational, but it is now, it is really expanded, and this behavior piece has taken off. That is where we see obviously the increases. I don't know what the answer is. All I know is if we're increasing the number of students being sent to special purpose private schools by 7, that we need to budget additional. Sorry, Molly.
2 questions. One, and I don't know if there's an appropriate way to ask, but are these 7 placements, some of our youngest students, are they new to our district because they are first-time students in school? Or is it a variety of ages? Is that, what's,
I'll defer to Sarah. Sarah?
One of them is new to our district. 3, 4 incoming kindergarten students. One is placed elsewhere currently, and we're not needing to fund that. And we're anticipating a return to district. They're in a 1-year program elsewhere. When they return to district, we'll need to fund that. So that's 4, 5, 6. I can't tell you who the 7th one is without making us way bigger right now. But yeah, predominantly young.
and my second question, sorry, was, I understand, what is the cost of receiving a citation? Like, if we were to bill main care, what is the offset cost there?
So
Should we just,
billing main care, you don't get any further ahead because in the state funding formula, they actually reduce your expenditures by your main care receipts. So we end up exactly in the same place, regardless of whether we bill main care or not. We decided years ago that we were not going to risk having another citation until they actually fixed the main care billing for the state. They haven't done that. What they have done is stopped auditing districts. So they've just kind of allowed districts. However, there is no benefit to us billing for main care because it nets out against their expenditures, which is how their subsidy is calculated for special ed. Does that make sense?
Basically, we're screwed.
There is no way around. Either we can hire somebody who bills who does main care billing. It is not a skill set that anyone here has, nor do we have capacity upstairs. We could hire somebody, we could bill, and at the end of the day, we will not get any more subsidy than we currently get based on our current expenditures. We will get revenue, but they will offset our expenditures by any revenue that we get. So
it's one or the other, and it's
It
the
is.
same result? Okay.
Exactly.
My question, I'm assuming not all of these situations have to do with autism or a spectrum disorder in terms of behavior. There are multiple reasons. Do we require that there are blood tests and a physical and maybe an encephalogram to find out, is there a medical reason for this?
It's not part of that process. If they're identified for special ed services, they have an IEP. We don't require any of those.
So basically, we're kind of flying blind in terms of causes for all of this increase. And it's kind of hard to put this on, regular instruction teachers and special instruction teachers, because we try to mainstream as much as possible. And we don't know if there is a physical reason for this that might not be fixed by what we're doing to try to educate them. Is that correct?
We wouldn't know those pieces as part of the IEP process, no.
So we're responsible for them, but we don't have all the information.
And we follow federal and state law
I
around
get that.
eligibility.
Yeah, I
Right, and
understand
so the pieces that you've mentioned, Joanne, aren't necessarily part of that eligibility process for determining what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate.
I shared with you yesterday an article in the newspaper from other school districts, Portland, South Portland, Lewiston. They're all having the same problems that we are having.
Yeah, I read the other.
It was a very good article. It is it is us, right? The same things that we talk about, they are talking about.
I do want to be mindful, and I think you alluded to it, Sarah, a little bit. We have to be mindful of like disclosing just so little information about anything that could be inferred about any individual or family, right? So we have to speak in generalities about a pretty small population for our district, but this is, yeah, a statewide piece. So maybe being aware of the global pieces, but it also limits how much we can like specifically know about any one situation. So I think, I don't know, just want to recognize that that's part of where we're at with what we're talking about here. And the other thing, more just my own memory, is that I remember Eric German talking about this at one thing, and just sort of that exposure has been there for, I don't know, decades, I don't know, as long. Yeah.
time.
And it just sort of feels like, so to speak, it's really coming to the forefront right now, both with rising costs of things, but also the rising number of people starting to use this. So just a reflection there, I guess, but it's really landing. And I think for me, just noticing, like, I think we don't always get much notice, but then this, I know people are working hard to like get our budget together, and then to have that switch so suddenly was like, man, it's a lot really fast.
This sounds cavalier, but I don't mean it that way. What's the success rate of district placements?
How are you defining success?
That's the question for you. How would you define success? Because I don't know how to define success, but I imagine people watching and listening might want to know what success means. I'm not that person.
I think that's multifaceted. For some students, it's being able to bring them back, reintegrate with their sending school, the community, and grow and develop with their peers. And we've done that with a number of students. We've had one unsuccessful transition. I covered out of districts when I was the assistant director of special services, and I still do. And so 9-ish years, we've had one unsuccessful transition back. And many, I can't even count them right now, successful transitions. The second criteria would be for students that we don't anticipate bringing back. Again, the confidentiality piece, I can't disclose too much. We've had a number of very complex students that have gone on to be programmed for elsewhere, close enough that they can still live with their family. That's not true for all students in Maine. Some students would have to go out of state, or they live in a remote part of Maine and they have to go to a residential placement in order to receive educational services. So far, we've been fortunate that we've had a number of students go to placements that are fairly complex students, and they've been able to live at home. They've been able to engage with their placement. They're meeting their IEP goals. And we've had some that have been here long enough now that I can say have moved on to adult living situations, where they're able to go to a day program, they're able to go to a group home.
And again, this is meant with the best heart. Just to be clear, these are not children that we would just label as naughty and not disciplined. These are genuine special needs. There's something that causes this behavior that is not malicious. It's just.
Like if you're talking about like social maladjustment, typically out of district placements won't.
Right, correct. That's where I'm trying to get without having the right language, but yes.
Yeah.
So it's bigger than.
So generally speaking, children that are in these programs will be in there all of their educational life, probably.
We do bring a ton back. I don't have exact numbers for you today, but we're talking about bringing 2 of the students on this current list of 10 back over the next year. That's we're usually working on at least one back at any given time.
It's just tough this year because we're adding 7.
Yeah.
Hopefully next year we'll only add none.
I can see our 4-year-olds. There's a trend.
Andrea, did you say that this change includes the anticipated 7 students?
What are you looking, you're looking at? So that is just a snapshot. What you're looking at there is just a snapshot. My increase is a ballpark guess. However, based on Sarah took my graph and made a trajectory. Who knows? You know, it's kind of, I want to make sure we're covered. Trying to make this manageable for the budget at the same time.
Right, I'm just saying, is this just adjusting for the 10 students?
It is.
Or is this adjusting for the
17.
10 plus 7?
It is what was in there plus what I thought I needed to cover the additional 7,
Okay,
not
you.
knowing
Right.
how those 7 are going to trend.
sure.
And we won't see how these students are trending until January of next year when I get third quarter. Is that right?
Yes.
Third quarter of. So I've also included for you a placement snapshot. So up above, you see 25, 26 placements. You see each of the 4 special purpose private schools that we're sending students, the annual cost, number of placements at each school. So currently we spend, and that's when I say currently as of today, that could change tomorrow. 658,000 for those 10 placements. We have spent to date 274,578 in seed. So that's a current total of 933,174.80. I didn't think of adding in special purpose private school transportation in the top half, but that is an additional expenditure as well. We talked before about having one student that we pay about $70,000 to transport, and others we transport using Bill Gordon's, which is actually, it is significantly less per mile than it costs us to run our district buses. So that's how we transport a lot of the other special purpose private schools. For next year, you see the anticipated placements and the additional cost for placements alone, 1,153,000. There's about 300,000 there in special purpose private school transportation and about 600,000 in main care seed money. So we're looking at about $2 million for next year.
Do the anticipated costs typically increase in this way, or you have for 25, 26, the annual cost per student is $60,819. But in 26, 27, it's 69,000.
So those were set by the state. The state sets these and they
Okay.
increase every year.
Okay, so
It's an anticipated increase. We will not know what that is. But the state sets different rates for every different provider. So it's not the
Okay.
same rate for all of the special purpose private school providers. The same way the state sets our tuition rate that we can charge RSU 12 students.
And we usually get that change after the school year has already started. So that will
It's change bills.
That's awesome.
Any more questions about what we've talked about so far? The next item that you see is another preliminary worksheet with the changes. So with a budget of an increase of 5.10% or 1.6 million in change, we're looking at a $1.9 million increase to the 4 municipalities or 14.4%. One of the things that I did not mention that we did not cover as part of this is our local entitlement. Sarah and Katie and I have been talking about local entitlement. I do not think that our local entitlement next year is going to be able to fund all of the ed tech supports that we currently have in local entitlement. I think currently we have, I want to say 18, but don't quote me on it. But based on the state increase for ed techs and the anticipated increase in health insurance. I think we're going to end up eating through a lot of our carryover, and as a result, we will not be able to fund the numbers that we currently fund. We are probably looking at adding 2 additional ed techs, special ed techs, the local budget. The 3 of us need to continue to have that conversation. But I figured I had shared enough bad news for one day that I would share more when we next meet. So I don't mean to make light of it, but questions? So does anybody have any questions about any of the intended cuts as far as the finance committee for Katie or myself? Going back to the pink sheet, the new cuts. And we'll talk about what we can expect next. I really do know.
Questions? Do you want to hear about? You want to hear more about the cuts? Just looking for a direction and what would be most helpful.
I was just noticing going through 126 pages. That we spend an awful lot of money on licensing software. So we don't own any of this, or we license it every year, and every year it goes up. What did we do back in 1983?
So some of it is instructional, some of it is curriculum licenses, some of it is licenses for our technology. I think the last meeting we talked about the licenses that we need for things like the Meraki. Did I get it right? The access points, those require licenses. Our telephone service, which is VoIP, requires licenses. Everything that we do now involves technology, and it all involves licenses. So yes, we cannot own any of these software, any of these programs that we are bound to the increases. Angela, you want to, sorry.
I was gonna say about the curriculum software that we're licensing, what are we licensing?
We went through this all in our last curriculum meeting on the second Tuesday of March. So that's on video. I'm pulling up a list that doesn't have the cuts that we need, so I'll have to do that for you.
Okay.
We have math software in kindergarten to 5th grade that is used across all 4 buildings for the supplemental, but it connects to the math direct instruction. And it's personalized learning, so if more students are at with actual instruction, it is not just James and time wasted and the data is used. It's Lexia, which is a literacy-based software. It is used K through 5. We cut the middle school version, and high school access version. And we are continuing to, I'm still continuing to negotiate that contract. That's one where I'm trying to get it down lower, which means certain grade levels will no longer have access. That's very specific practice on things like prefix, suffix, root words, sentence structure, the grammar, a lot of grammar stuff that we are failing at miserably. And this has helped us because it gives us identifiable, and it also comes with a lot of really incredibly strong instructional materials. But we're still looking at figuring out a way to reduce time, looking at a way to reduce that. It's a science software package that provides the instructional curriculum, not the lab materials for elementary. It is keyboarding licenses, 4th grade. It's the only grade we provide direct instruction in keyboarding. literacy access in grades 6 through 12 for differentiated materials, since we have such a wide range of student reading proficiency. Library licenses, those are almost all conducted through, there's in Maine State Libraries, there is it's almost like a co-op. So we can say that the body, the unifying body can get like mass purchasing rights, and it gives us, based on our student enrollment, rights to access online readable texts at differentiated levels at a very low cost. So that's actually in our favor. If we had to do it on our own, it would be a lot higher. Does it include the library, all the library software? So the library management software. And then assessment. Does assessment go into curriculum?
So the library management software is how they check books in and out.
Yep.
So
Power School's Naviance solution, that's for college preparatory planning and guidance. The only tool we use for that. Most schools use it, and it also helps with applications. School counselors and teachers, when asked to write letters of recommendation for college applications, they can run it through that system. All colleges have access to that. And that's actually good. And then assessment is under a different section. All of our intervention software, so tracking, we've been trying to build this out so that we didn't have, because Google is lovely, but it's also highly complicated for trying to track interventions. And so we're trying to use a site that already does that, and manage that. CELA by literacy falls under this. That's a state assessment, but we pay the software license across world languages. NOEA is a state assessment, but we pay the license for 2nd grade and 9th grade. They pay the license for 3rd through 8th and 10th grade. Multilingual learner software to align, which is very inexpensive, to align with the required state assessment for all multilingual learners that they have to take every year. That part's paid by the state. I think that's all my thoughts.
So years ago, the big lines used to be textbooks. We used to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in textbooks. We no longer buy
We have
thousands of dollars in
we have
textbooks.
limited, so we are on a very distinct textbook purchasing cycle, and most of them are probably pretty antiquated. But we have been able to get Latin because it was decades, and we do have textbook purchases in the budget for French and Spanish, only level 1 this year, and AP Statistics 1 classroom set. We try to buy only 1 classroom set when we can, and they share them and use them in the building and not at home. Because as we talked about last year, textbooks cost like $160 a book. So we try to get as few books as possible and share them. And then the teachers are very creative in how we legally access instructional materials to support any app.
But this has really replaced those textbooks
instructional
purchases.
software has,
This is what we're using now.
And it's mostly what's available. I mean, if you're an education corporation, it makes more sense for you to design software that's accessible to schools than hardware now, hard copies. And so to navigate around that is pretty hard.
But you have to buy it.
That's why, exactly why it's beneficial to the education corporation, right? So we do try to limit that in this system. I mean, I'd say the instructional staff would probably love a lot of other tools, but we don't really offer that. I am trying to, where there was a number of cuts, I tried to find an evidence-based tool that had math and literacy for a much lower price, and I was able to do that. The first year, it's a 3-year license. The first year you only pay 50%, and the next 2 years you pay 25% of the license, which means it cuts in half for the next 2 years, which will help us in our long-term budget. And it's one of the more functional license structures I've seen in a while. I think they're trying to be responsive. And the cost, like, per student is really low, but they've redesigned the software, and so I probably wouldn't have bought it 5 or 10 years ago, but I think the updates now are more educationally appropriate. And so that was a compromise we made, like, let's cut this one that's really high and let's find one that's better and much lower. So that is reflected in the budget Andrea presented. We are trying, and there are still a few more that I'm negotiating to try to get down, but.
And speaking of trying, you know, this last year for those of us who were here last year, it was difficult last year when we made our budget cuts. We have not, with the exception of one position, that's all we've added. So as difficult as it was last year, it is more difficult to find cuts that don't impact students. And it doesn't look like we are making much.
We were hoping to be further along. I mean,
Yep.
the seed information was an absolute setback. I mean, as an administrative team, we're looking hard at where we can decrease without a significant impact to our students. And the reality is, there aren't a lot of places to go to reduce. We continue to look at administrative positions. We've had transportation quote the price of vans in an attempt to see if there would be a benefit to us being able to shift some of the transportation to special purpose private schools to our drivers in order to reduce some of the costs that we have built in. We are talking about instructional positions at this point being the next place where we can reduce, and I'm confident that it's the position of this finance committee that our current increase of 14% needs to be lower.
Do we have any unfilled positions that are budgeted? Do we have any and how
We
many?
had someone's here that were
Yep.
just taken out of the budget because they were on.
Are there others?
So the learning lab position was filled at the beginning of the year. That person at the middle school since took an unfilled math position, a teaching position, and it remained unfilled. We also have a couple of unfilled special ed positions. The three of us met. We discussed which positions Sarah felt that she could do without. And then we added some unfilled positions, hoping that we can fill them for next year. These are positions that are needed. So other than that,
I think it is important to recognize, again, that an unfilled position, while it seems like it's been unfilled, so we can just carry on without it. We've made it this far. That is not the experience for staff and students. I mean, it ultimately is a reduction and it's not enough to get us to a single digit increase at this point. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, if you have unfilled positions, it means that the kids are not getting all the services that they need to get. That's why I get concerned when it's like, well, we're now down to instructional positions to lose, because that is the core of what we're supposed to be here for, is the education of students. And so, you know, I don't know where we go, because I don't think we can cut anything else in terms of instruction. We're already cutting to based on enrollment for kindergarten, right? Or in elementary. And as we know, that's where we have some of the biggest behavioral issues. And not all of them have IEPs necessarily. So I can't see where we lose more people in terms of dealing with our kids on a day-to-day basis for the educational part.
And I would say, Joanne, that already we have, when a position remains unfilled, what we have are staff members who are taking on more to provide what is needed.
And that's
For
where we get
students.
the burnout, where eventually they just can't do any more. And then we're gonna be paying for substitutes, because there are, I'm sure, days where it's like, it's a mental health day. I just cannot go in and deal with this in another day. And that's why I get very concerned that we don't know why we have such an increase in the behavioral issues. Because if we can't address root causes, then it's always like putting a Band-Aid on, and we can't keep asking our teachers to be everything to everyone. And taking the responsibility, because they hit a breaking point.
My question is around, if there are unfilled positions and they don't get filled, and that seems to be the discussion a lot of times over the year, a couple of years I've been listening, that we have positions that seem to never get filled. You're always dealing with unfilled positions. So if you can lower your budget by eliminating the positions that never get filled, you haven't hurt anybody because there's nobody filling them. I mean, I know that I'm kind of throwing something at the wall and hope it sticks, but it's just a thought. If that's a possibility, good. If it isn't, then that's what we have to do.
Most of our unfilled positions are in special ed. We are asking huge asks of Ed Tech 3s providing instructions in lieu of teachers. We need teachers in these positions, and we are not the only ones struggling finding special ed positions. If you open up Serving Schools, you will see pages and pages of advertisements for special ed positions. They are needed.
I know, and I'm not
I
trying
know
to
you're
eliminate people,
not.
I'm just saying,
I know you're
I'm
not.
looking at the budget end of it, that's all.
Yeah.
Molly, you've
and
had your
it's-
hand up for a bit.
I would just add, while we need to get through this budget season and we have work to do, we're not anticipating that this is going to improve in coming years. The bottom line really comes down to the conversation we've been having around consolidation and what steps can we take to reduce where we duplicate costs or those facility costs, as we're maintaining our 6 buildings. So ultimately, though, every decision that we make really needs to be moving us in a direction to reduce those costs. That's where we'll see an impact, and not necessarily with just an elimination or a reduction of teaching positions. But if we can get at some of those facility costs and transportation costs, that's with declining enrollment, that's really what I see as a necessary next part of the process. It doesn't help us this year because of the process of consolidation and the potential of closing a building. The process to that is extensive, and that's the work that we have ahead of us. Certainly, Molly, sorry about.
One question for clarification, because I'm trying to catch up. I missed last week's meeting, but we listed 2 unfilled special ed positions last week, and then we listed 2 this week. Are they the same?
Yep,
Okay,
they are.
I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if we were going 4 or 2.
Just 2.
Okay, and then when I did listen to last week's meeting, we were talking about the technology and the units, and I think you said there were 186 or 187 units.
187.
Okay, and I'm assuming all of the licenses expired at the same time. Is there any savings or opportunity to cut that in half and do half this year and half next year, or to spread that, like?
They're end of life. If we don't replace them,
Mhm.
there will be no wireless access in the building.
Right, but if we don't replace all of them, or if we replaced half, could we utilize enough Wi-Fi in the building?
It would be very hard because the Chromebooks run on wireless access.
Mhm.
So if I don't replace one in Miss Smith's room, then all the Chromebooks that are coming in don't have that access point. They're not going to connect to the internet. If we don't have this one here, you might be able to get a signal from one that's in by Sarah's office, but maybe not 2. The other thing is, there's only a certain number of people that can connect to a wireless access point, and then it basically gets overwhelmed. So with the ones that are in the building, pretty much you have to do it. So what I did was I went and I cut the elementary laptops out of the budget to afford the wireless access points. And I also cut a lot of the supply budget, so I think we went down $85,000. So we'll skip 1 year of student laptops, make do with what we have, change our wireless access points out, and then next year, go again.
Thanks. Creative.
Federal money is a wonderful thing until it runs out,
Yeah.
and then we get used to, we bought things that are difficult to put back into our budget. It's just hard. We try to find things that don't create a cliff and
Yeah.
I'd like to touch back on Joanne's comment or statement about root causes of the behaviors. And I guess this is a Sarah question. I'm not sure who's responsible to establish a root cause for a behavior issue. Is that I mean, you're not a doctor and you're not you're a special ed director whose responsibility it is to provide services for every single.
Oh, sorry, guys.
You okay?
I'm okay. I think I fell asleep.
I'm
sorry.
Oh.
It's not the worst thing that happened today.
Geez, if it's not, then
As long as my laptop.
You need a-
Terry's gonna kill me.
That's when it's gonna
do you
get.
need a minute to gather yourself?
but she's
I
worried
am
about.
so sorry to.
It's okay. Root cause, we don't discuss necessarily root cause as far as special services goes. And when we discuss eligibility for services for a student with an IEP, ideally, the school-based team has done the MTSS pieces. We talk about eligibility, we talk about do they require, so MTSS helps us figure out if they rise to the level of needing services or not. And as long as the school team has done those pieces, we're able to then talk about, yes, they need services, no, they don't need services. This district does a good job with that. Developing MTSS, going to a meeting, saying, yeah, we need to do more of that, and no, we don't. It doesn't really, what are you thinking about root cause? I mean, yes, we can see a student has a specific learning disability, a student has other health impairment.
But students do have evaluations conducted.
Yeah.
By like the school psychologist and stuff, and that data helps the team make decisions about how can we help them access education? What services can help them grow and access education? So there's it isn't just what we think will help them, but what is, and some of these
What's the value?
evaluations are quite clear or helpful.
Yeah, and just because the evaluation says a student has, say, autism, or sometimes we have doctors say a student has a specific learning disability, it doesn't mean their needs rise to a level of needing services either. And we have plenty of students that receive accommodations for a 504 plan or don't have a plan. And we have a number of students that fall under that umbrella as well. But as far as, I don't know if you're going back to the question earlier, the root cause of, say, behaviors and how are we going to address that as a system, that's a really big question.
Right.
And
That's
it
kind of
helps.
where I'm heading. I don't know that it's your job to fix systemic behavior issues unless they fit within the purview of your role as a special ed director and yours as the curriculum, the director of curriculum and instruction. If there are issues that are not related to either one of those things, they're just an issue.
Well, I think
I'm trying to ask really carefully.
I think in some ways, we're always looking at big picture. So for example, at the curriculum meeting, we did discuss some trends in student behavior, specifically in the early grades that we hadn't typically seen for a number of years and we have in the last few years. And we researched others, we had a whole committee, we researched other school systems, what their response system is, we looked, double checked all the laws, all those things to say, what is the most efficient and effective response system that we could have that helps build the children's capacity to learn alongside their peers. And we presented a proposal around how we would like to structure that, how we would like that system to work. It's what we call a tier 3 intervention around behavior. The board approved, it's considering all this, it's very low cost, it's redirection of certain things. And it will go into place next year. And it is a way to get ahead of some of the challenges that we've been experiencing that have created a lot of frustration for young people and staff and families. It still allows us in partnership with families, not disclosing very specifics about children, but that to me is like, that's what we have agency over, is like, okay, we're seeing all these things. And every child's a little bit different and has a little bit different context, but from this, what can we learn and how can we redesign our system to be more effective? And that's what we're always doing. And we do that when we think about whether we should have a program for students with autism or a program for students with behavior or certain types of staff, so that what we have agency over where we can help kids access learning and collaborate with their peers or communicate effectively with their peers. We do that, I think, and we're always in this like continuous improvement and evolutionary process. And I think collaboratively as a unit, as a whole system, we continue to do that. I mean, we've redesigned the 6 through 12 behavior response staffing model, I don't know, 3 or 4 times since I've been here. And the numbers and the dynamics change in that space depending on whatever the need is. And trying to do it in a really frugal way is something that I think we always work towards and strive towards. In some of the things, when I hear root cause and the work I've done around root cause, I think of a lot of things like that's a societal issue, there are family structures and dynamics, and those, we are not the parents of these children. We are a school system that provides opportunity to learn. And so we just have to make sure that we're staying within that space to allow access for and safe environment for learning.
Go ahead.
Yes, Mom.
Sorry, shifting gears, but just to try and review, the half instructional support at HTS is the other half of the assistant principal at HT, is that correct?
Yes.
And not listed here because we haven't kept it in our budget is an additional nurse that we hired this year, is that correct? So we are.
There are no new positions in this budget with the exception of that kindergarten position that we hired that we established, or the board established in July to deal with those numbers. There are no additional positions or contracted services for positions added to this budget.
But you also said we've eliminated 2 elementary instruction, which those are kindergarten as well, correct? So
Those
is
are
it-
elementary positions based
Elementary.
on
Okay, I'm
projected
sorry.
enrollment.
Okay. And what is the learning lab ed tech unfilled position? Is that, that's the middle
So,
school?
yeah, that was the position where she was a learning lab ed tech and moved into an open teacher position.
Mhm.
So that remained unfilled for the rest of the year.
And the leadership stipend and the assistant principal?
That's a reduction of assistant principal at the high school. And the leadership stipend was the multi-school leader stipend as part of the teacher leadership model that we use, opportunity culture.
Mhm.
So that is what that was. It was intended to be a 1 year, and after evaluation, we've determined that that can be a reduction for next year.
Does it affect the progress of opportunity culture, or are we still?
We're still committed to the model of
Mhm.
building teacher leadership capacity.
Mhm.
And so that work will continue for next year without that specific role.
Was that a stipend we previously, it was in our budget as a different stipend and we shifted it to be an opportunity culture stipend?
So if you remember, last year we had stipends in our budget for case management of special ed. I want to say purpose private schools, but that's not what we're talking about. We had case management stipends for special ed educators when we developed the, I want to call them implementation specialists, but I know inclusion specialists. They took over the paperwork for the special educators, so those stipends for the special ed educators those funds were recaptured. Part of those stipends were cut as part of last year's budget, but another portion of it was repurposed for opportunity culture. Wow, that was a long roundabout way. So yes.
And you said that stipend was a one-year stipend?
That $5,000 stipend, yes. Yep. Andrea and I sat together today and ran numbers comparing stipends, the amount built into the budget for stipends last year compared to this year, and there was a reduction of about $2,000 this year, this current year. So it really was a shift.
And is the assistant principal position because of an enrollment or just simply?
Partly because of enrollment, declining enrollment over time and trying to monitor the ratio, the student to administrator ratio. We're trying to pause on hiring open positions without knowing ultimately how many reductions we'll have. We would like to be able to preserve the staff members that we currently have, if at all possible. And that certainly applies here with that reduction of the assistant principal position at the high school.
Is that position just filled? Was it?
Yes. We had a resignation in the fall. And then the position was vacant for a while before we hired.
So when we were reviewing the 8279, if you remembered, we talked, the ratios that Katie refers to are the ratios, the staff ratios on page 1 of that huge document. There's several areas where we are top heavy, so to speak. Administration is one of them. Health nursing services is another. And the reason that we are over is because of the number of buildings that we have. It is impossible to go without administrators in all of our buildings. We've tried that in years past, it doesn't work. So trying to find ways of bringing our ratios in line on the 8279 with our trending enrollment. As a reminder, we lost 100 students this year. It's an enrollment trend across the state. It's nothing new with us. If you read the article, districts talk about similar with the trending valuations and declining enrollment. We're all in the same predicament.
What can we be doing about enrollment? What can we do to try and attract students who could be choosing to come to Gardner?
There just aren't kids. People aren't traveling.
There are neighboring districts that could be choosing to come to our district that don't have a high school. They have school choice. So am I incorrect in assuming that they could be choosing to come to Gardner?
RSU 12, we have some students from RSU 12. There are just fewer students there. We've seen our overall enrollment at RSU 12. Lauren has recruited, for lack of a better word, students for next year. However, it only replaces the students that we're losing. We're not gaining any students. The students that we're graduating. So
This is the whole idea that we need to become a more efficient system because running 6 buildings is a real challenge. And we've got the duplication, again, of some services that we could reduce in a more consolidated state. and also being mindful to not dismantle our system, trying to be efficient under really challenging circumstances. And so while we need to prioritize some programming that and services that we can offer, we also want to be mindful of multiple pathways and different interests so that we can, and programs, co-curricular programs, so that we can entice and keep students attending. That's not easy work. It's a delicate balance, and that's exactly where we are today.
I think the facilities upkeep is probably another huge.
And unfortunately,
Significant.
the state will not just allow us to hang a closed sign on any of our schools. There is a process for closing schools, a statute that requires us to go out to referendum with the town that the school resides in. So, honestly, as soon as we pass our budget, it would be my hope that this board would start entertaining, looking at contracting with somebody we talked about this, to look at our facilities, to guide us with data, to figure out which of our facilities we'll be looking at closing first, but it's not an option. And by closing, there needs to be regular instruction, so we just can't have a school and put a special purpose a special ed class in it. It needs to be regular instruction. So, and if you have instruction there, you may as well run the building because you need to keep the facilities open. It's difficult.
If we were going to look for, Molly, an answer to your question, how could we get people to come to our schools? I was at a meeting on Saturday and I have data for the last 6 years about how many students have chosen to be homeschooled. And it's a big number. Not a staggering number, but it's a big number. And I think one of the conversations that we had with the Sierra Wood from the Department of Education is our parents, what are parents upset about? What kind of conversations are we having with, and I think it's messaging. Part of it is messaging. And is there a way that we can really zero in on what it is that we provide for students? And it's not, part of it is money, but that there are freedoms for people that want to express their religious beliefs, that you have the opportunities to do those things in policy and in law, to exclude your students from things you don't want them to be learning in school. But part of it is an awareness. Are we having those conversations with parents? I have no idea if we are or not, with parents before they choose to homeschool their children. And do you get that opportunity? Because one of the untracked areas in homeschooling is that not every family keeps up with the year over year paperwork and justification for why you're doing what you're doing. So is it really meeting the needs of the students? Is it in their best interest? And every parent wants what's in the best interest of their student. All of us do. So if there's a way that messaging could play a role in that, we might be able to shrink that number.
And we are also here because the state funding formula is inadequate. They're reviewing that.
Yeah.
So.
And it's being redone. But it's not people that aren't getting money next year are already dead.
It's,
Can I email you with any suggestions?
Yes.
I'll do that.
Would you send it to all of us?
No. Andrea,
Okay.
or all of you, I don't care.
I mean, you may have the thing none of us have thought of.
I see things that, I'm gonna put a percentage number beside all these items I'm looking at and see if we can. Without, take a hatchet instead of an axe and do a little chipping away here and then. Sometimes if you take care of the nickels, the dollars will follow,
So, so this week we'll be getting our health insurance anticipated ceiling of our increase, so we'll see if there's any cuts there. Next meeting, we'll talk about carry forward. We'll go through that whole discussion. I know there's a temptation to use a lot more carry forward. I don't think it will fix our problem of living beyond our means, and by that I mean the community schools, not that we have a lot. It's 6:30. It's
It is 6:30.
1.
Yeah, 6:30.
Quick point of clarification, are we accepting the reductions as they are, or is there gonna be a little further conversation? We just have some implications, what are the implications?
I think the conversation continues next week.
I would love to know more about the implications.
There hasn't been a vote here, so thank you for asking. Yeah.
Just hard to talk to people, so.
What to
Oh,
share.
I know, and none of us looks forward to any of it, so.
We
It is
done?
now 6:32.
Move your adjournment.
Yes. Thank you all for coming.